Last month, voters in Egypt approved a new military-backed constitution. The constitution replaces the one Islamist President Mohamed Morsi introduced before the military ousted him last July.
Even though it passed, the referendum was polarizing and left at least a dozen people dead and hundreds injured or in jail. Alex spoke with VOA Cairo correspondent Elizabeth Arrott about the vote and her reporting on it. Here's a look at that.
Egypt's election workers were still counting the ballots when officials claimed overwhelming passage of the country's new constitution. Authorities said more than 90% of voters in a high turnout approved the charter, touted as backing for the military's ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi last year. Supporters of the constitution and of de facto leader General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi took to the streets in celebration. But election monitors condemned the apparent suppression of those campaigning against the charter. Secular activists who advocated a no vote were arrested. Mr. Morsi's now banned Muslim Brotherhood boycotted the referendum.
So we've seen some independent observers come out and criticize this referendum process, saying that the campaign took place within a context of fear, intimidation, and repression, and then coupled with the reports of violence. What does this mean for the future of Egypt, and where does the country go from here? Is this really a step forward?
That would depend on who you ask. I think for all the opposition, what they say is that they failed to really make any kind of, inclusion, comprehensive effort to move forward. That pretty much Egyptian politics in the last few years has been seen as a zero-sum game. When the military is in power right after the revolution, they didn't allow a lot of room for opposition. When Morsi was in power, he also failed to sort of engage the opposition, and the criticism of him and his groups were that they excluded everybody else. And we're seeing the same thing again. The idea of compromise and moving together in a pluralistic way has yet to really sink in here, and that is going to be the biggest challenge I think most people see in going forward.
Elizabeth, we've seen this referendum take place. Now that Egyptians have voted yes on this new constitution, what happens next?
Well, according to the roadmap that the military-backed government put in place after they ousted Mohamed Morsi last summer, there is supposed to be presidential and parliamentary elections. So it's setting the stage to pretty much just what they're saying is make the transition back to some kind of stability. And what we'll probably see, and everybody's expecting, is to see General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who is the de facto leader, become the official leader by running for president.
How does this constitution differ from the one we saw previously? What kinds of protections are involved for different religious groups? I know that that's an element of this.
It certainly is, and it doesn't have some of the Islamist elements that we saw in the 2012 constitution that President Morsi had sort of pushed through and caused quite a bit of concern among various groups. Now, the very fact that there have been 3 constitutions in 3 years, no matter how well written this constitution is, the very fact that they can be superseded by something else so quickly gives an indication that what really matters is the laws and how they're enforced by who's ever happening, on the street, whether it's the police or the soldiers, that they can really override these kinds of basic charters such as this current one.
Elizabeth, what was the mood at the polls? You spoke to a significant number of voters. How are they feeling about both the process and the prospects for this new constitution?
Well, the people we spoke to, like most of the people who turned out for the polls, because it was overwhelmingly in support of the constitution, the no vote was very much suppressed. They were very pro-Sisi, very pro the roadmap, and in fact quite hostile to foreign reporters like ourselves. And it was funny, they were trying desperately to cover up. There was some graffiti you might have seen in our report, sort of anti-government, anti-military.
You mentioned that there are fewer Islamist elements in this new constitution. How much of a role, though, will Sharia law still play in Egypt from this point with the new constitution, and what does that mean for Coptic Christians?
Well, like all of the constitutions, I mean, even in the Mubarak era, that before the revolution, Sharia law was looked to as an inspiration for all laws. It's a majority Muslim country, and even in the sort of secular pre-revolutionary time, it was the foundation in terms of inspiration, and it's a very conservative country. So people are not opposed to that. What they didn't like was sort of the politicized Islam. As for the Christians, they're perfectly happy to have this as a group, and certainly from their leaders. They were very happy to see this new constitution go into place. It was indicative of a less politicized Islam, and they felt very threatened, especially after the ouster of President Morsi, when many churches were attacked.
All right, and again, that was VOA correspondent Elizabeth Arrott in Egypt. Now, former President Mohamed Morsi still faces charges in Cairo for a 2011 prison escape, along with 130 others, including Muslim Brotherhood leaders.